So what I'm going to do today is basically link up with the previous presenters and essentially talk about how we can build world-class institutions in India. As part of this process, I will share with you some interesting historical perspectives that you may not have seen before, and also share with you some current research that also bears at the topic at hand. Now, this is something that we have already seen, that currently there's not a single Indian institution in the top 200 in any of the global rankings. There are some which are just below 200, and then there are a few others in the top 400. But this was not always so. The interesting thing is that if you look at the 2,600-year history of universities, which up to this point nobody has looked at, and I'm making an attempt to do so, you find three clear divisions. For 1,800 years, India dominated higher education in the sense that we had the largest, in fact, we had the only universities for over 1,000 years that functioned in any part of the world. And for 1,800 years, they were arguably, unquestionably, the dominant force in higher education for 1,800 years. Europe then takes over for 700 years, and then America has been dominating for 100. Now, the interesting thing is that Takshashila, the very first university, was also not just a global university, but perhaps the most global university ever, in the sense that all the four civilizations of that time, the Greek, the Persian, the Chinese, and the Indian, came together. It sat at the intersection of three trade routes, one which went up to China, the Silk Route, one which went west to Persepolis in Iran, and one, interestingly enough, this is something that most people have forgotten, the Uttar Path, which connected Pushkalvati, that is Peshawar, to Patliputra through Takshila, a road of 2,000 kilometers that is currently known as the Grand Trunk Road. That was the artery that connected higher education in India. The people who came to Takshila were people like Alexander, people like Chandragupta Maurya, even the disciple of Christ, St. Thomas. It has been found in the last 3 years conclusively spent a year in Takshila before he went to Surat and then to Calicut in Kerala, where the first community of Christians outside of India was formed. So basically, very, very interesting history. But what is important to realize is that Takshila was the first, but then very soon, about a dozen institutions of higher education also coalesced in different parts of India. There was, of course, Nalanda that we talk about, but also competing with Nalanda, there was Vikramshila, which was the most evolved Indian university in terms of its institutional structure. There was Sompura, Odantapuri, and for Gujarat, how can we forget, there was Vallabhi. Vallabhi, friends, is extremely interesting because the focus of Vallabhi was initially on women's education, remember 6th century AD, and focus was on management and administration. It was, if you will, the IIM Ahmedabad of its time. And the reason also was interesting that the best graduates of Vallabhi went to work in administration in the state, the Maitrak dynasty in Gujarat. So, very, very interesting history, but now the key point is, and this is extremely important if you're going to see why and how world-class universities are created, that in 2,600 years of history that I've been looking at, there has never been a for-profit university that has ever amounted to anything in the production of knowledge. Now, why is that? The reason is because economists, and I'm one, economists understand this as externalities. That is, the social benefits to education are so much greater than the private benefit that no private player can ever really emerge. Also, in production, in the constitution of a university, the fact that having bright students and bright faculty means that the quality of education is improved for everybody, means that if you try and admit people on the basis of the ability to pay, you will create a class that is not very bright or academically gifted, and therefore it will reduce the quality of education for everybody. So great educational institutions have always been elite institutions, and therefore they have always been non-profit, and therefore there has been a huge subsidy that has been involved, which the Indian system always had. Nalanda in particular had the land revenue of 200 villages that was given to it in perpetuity. That is basically what endowed a community of 13,000 scholars and faculty that we talked about this morning. The Chief Minister talked about that. So, and the reason is that, and this is also the reason why, for example, basic research can never really be done outside of universities, with very few exceptions. IBM and the old Bell Labs are two prominent examples. That is because there is no gain in doing basic research, right? You cannot patent it, you cannot patent a formula, you cannot patent a law of nature. So non-profits are extremely important. So what does that mean? Two key things that I've already identified are great universities need lots of resources and they need competition. The reason, friends, why Vikramshila was founded was because Dharampal, the ruler of the Pala dynasty in eastern India, said Nalanda is becoming too complacent, the faculty are becoming arrogant, they need competition. So 30 kilometers away from Nalanda, he creates Vikramshila, endows it with 100 villages, the land revenue of that, and they provided competition. So this is something which is essential. If you do not have competition, if you do not have access to resources, you're not going to create great institutions. So let me take this story to contemporary times and actually focus on this ranking, which several others have alluded to. But what you see is something quite striking. And here I use the Shanghai Jiaotong ranking because it's neither European nor American, so therefore it's slightly bit more objective because many of the rankings which are coming out of Europe or North America have a home bias, if you will. But what is striking here is that 17 of the top 20 universities in the world are American. Now, why is that? And I'll cut to the chase since we don't have much time. This is a piece of research that I've just finished. It took me a year to do it. My hunch was that it has to do with the governance of the top 100 universities in the United States. So it took me a year to get the data on the governance structures and the board composition. So I have data now on 102 of the 103 US universities. And I'll just show you the top 20. And I think the main point will become very clear. So this is the list of the top 20 universities in the United States. Look at their board composition. I have the total number of trustees. And remember, they're all nonprofit, right? So they have boards of trustees. The percentage of alumni on the board is more than 50% in every case except one, which is Caltech, which is 40%. If you look at the top 5, 3 of them have 100% alumni governance. The other 2 are at 90%. Now, this is really quite striking, and this is at the heart of why America was able to overtake Europe in a matter of about 50 years, starting around 1850, when this, or 1865, when this form was instituted. And really, it turns out that the university that pioneered this was Harvard. In 1865, 29th of April, 1865 to be precise, Harvard, which was a Sarkari university, which was a government-run university run by the state of Massachusetts, was turned over to its alumni. The interesting thing is that if you ask people at Harvard today, 99 out of 100 people would tell you that it has always been a private university. Wrong. Most people, even at Harvard today, don't realize that it was a government university for several hundred years, and that its road to excellence began when it was turned over to the alumni. And pretty soon, Yale copies it. It was turned over by the state of Connecticut to its alumni. Princeton copies it, turned over by New Jersey to its alumni. And pretty much all universities, public, private, religious, or non-religious, are now run by the alumni in the United States. Now, why? So very briefly, why does this work? Well, it aligns, as we say, as in economics, we say it aligns information and incentives. Why incentives? Because nobody cares about the university more than the alumni. If you have a degree from a university for the rest of your life, you are known as the product of University X. And therefore, you're always branded as a product of the University X. And if the university does well, it is your prestige that goes up, so to speak. So nobody cares, in some sense, more about the university than the alumni, point number one. Point number two, nobody has more information about the university than the alumni because they have studied there, they know its pluses and minuses. And also through the alumni network, they have continuing up-to-date information. So that is the reason why alumni governance works so well. So in particular, what we are suggesting, and the alumni board of trustees then hold the institution, the administration accountable, they make available resources, so it's not accidental that the first university to be put under alumni governance, Harvard, has the largest endowment in the world at $30 billion. And the interest basically from that is something that endows great research in perpetuity. So the plan for India. So what we are proposing And here I will not go through any more slides, but I'll just sort of quickly leave you with a few ideas. What we are proposing, that if you look at the institutions in India which have very well established alumni bodies, the older IIMs, the older IITs, central universities like Banaras Hindu University, Aligarh Muslim University, Shantiniketan, Jawaharlal Nehru University, very well established alumni bodies, very distinctive alumni bodies. Yet all of these institutions are now becoming same in some sense because they are being put under the single mosquito net that is government regulation, right? So they all look the same, you can make out a few forms, but they're essentially being run in a very similar fashion. So what we are proposing is that very quickly move in the direction of increasing alumni representation, increasingly get the alumni involved in the running of these universities, let them raise the resources, let them basically bring in the checks and balances, let them bring in all the social perspectives that these universities need, and basically very quickly raise them to world-class standards. As indeed was the case with Harvard, Yale, Princeton, that within years of basically being turned over to the alumni, they started their ascent to world status. So that is what we are proposing. There is a lot of traction on this, and we need your support. Thank you very much indeed.